Welcome back from the break, and this is the part of the show where I know you are eager to learn. So pick a pen, pick a piece of paper, and jot this down because we are talking about how to clear debt. And what does debt mean for you and your company in the long run? We talked to two experts, and that's exactly what we're getting into right now, so don't go anywhere. Good morning and welcome to KTN Life and Style. And today we're having a conversation with Roy Okunji about debt. And he is the person you need to be talking to when it comes to matters debt. He is an author. He talks about it in general terms on YouTube and everything surrounding debt. So Roy, thank you so much for gracing us with your presence this morning and your knowledge, because that is what we want to get out of you today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, so in terms of debt, we asked this question because COVID-19 came and it changed our lives. And I don't think we can ever forget about this time. People lost their jobs, people's companies were closed down because you cannot, you can't afford the day-to-day running. You can't live on debt, you get? Because even for small scale people like me, Mshwari was not giving us any money. So people say
True.
debt is good, and you also reiterate this. How do we say debt is good when everything associated with debt is bad? Because anytime money enters your pocket, ni deni unalipa. So how is debt good?
Thank you so much. That is a great question. Sometimes when people talk about the goodness and the badness of debt, uh, every borrower thinks their debt was good because they had a good reason that was pushing them into the debt. At the time of needing money, whatever is pushing you into getting that money seems to be good at that point. But we differentiate good and bad debt from the perspective of what that debt is doing to you, and especially in the long run. And we say that good debt leaves you better off than it found you, especially in the long run, than bad debt. Bad debt will leave you worse off. Good debt brings value to you. Bad debt takes away value from you. In financial terms, good debt brings money to you. In other words, it pays itself and leaves you with some more money. Bad debt, on the other hand, takes money away from you. It comes to rob you of what you had, and it does not bring anything to you at all. So basically, that would be the differentiation between good and bad debt. But I must mention quickly that every debt carries a burden element, whether it was good or bad. Even if it's paying itself, you find yourself saying, I can't wait for the day I'll be through with this debt because it's an obligation.
Is there a way you can avoid debt?
Now, I like saying, these days you hear people say very many interesting things about debt. You've heard people say, for instance, that mwanaume ni deni, mtu ni deni, you can't live without debt, and all those things. And interestingly, they get into our minds. And I've met people who've borrowed when they ought not to have borrowed at all. But just because we live in a society that has everyone talking about debt and everyone seems to normalize debt, then we live thinking that if you do not have debt, you've been left out. And that is not the truth. The truth is that you can actually live without debt. You can actually avoid this burden completely, and then live in what I call the organic way of living. That means that you're able to plan within your income and contain yourself within that income. Ideally, that is what is supposed to be happening, especially at an individual, from an individual perspective. So then you say, I am earning this much. And when this money comes, this is how I want to use it. And I want to contain myself within this amount. And then be real about it. The challenge that we have as individuals a lot of times is that we do not live our own lives. We live for others. I live thinking, what will they think about me? How are my classmates doing? So where I work, where do they live? If I live from this other end, what will happen when they learn that I live from this other end? And so we have all those thoughts coming in to corrupt our thinking around money. And then before you know it, you are spending more than you are earning, right? I like saying that many people, it's good to live within your means, but
Yes.
many people push their living standard ahead, and then they pray and hope that one day their means will come and accommodate them. So you don't grow and wait for your means to follow and accommodate you. you contain yourself in your current means, then grow the means, then follow the grown means, and that becomes the natural way of doing it. I have met people who confess they do not owe anyone, and that is how they have lived, and that is how they do it. But for business, it is still possible to do it, only that many times, depending also on the nature of the business, the growth might be slower. And debt comes in to catalyze the growth.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, because then we call it using other people's money for business growth. So, for instance, if you are running a retail business where you're buying things and selling them, if you had a capital of 100,000, you're only constrained to buying those things at 100 Gs and selling them. Now, if those things are supplied to you once in a day, and by 10 a.m. you have sold all of them, that means all the customers from 10 to the end of the day, they'll come to buy nothing. Yeah, they ask, you have this, akuna, until tomorrow when you go for your supply. So debt comes in to boost your working capital from 100,000 to whatever it is, so that you can buy a larger stock, so that it can sustain you throughout the day. And that begins to also expand your profit. And then after you've done your sales, the debt is able to pay itself and also leave you with something. At the end of the day, when you clear that debt, you have a bigger working capital.
May I ask, because from that explanation, it sounds to me, for someone who doesn't have a very deep financial background, like an investment, you know? And even most of the people I talk to, and they're like, mtu hana deni hana pesa, you know? Because they're not taking risks. That's what they explain. So for me, what you're telling me, I hear investment, and I don't know the difference. So what's the difference between me getting money from someone to put in to the business, like you said, like a catalyst, and getting ninakuchukua deni?
You see, when you pick debt, what you go to do with the debt is very important, right? Now, there is a difference between just borrowing and consuming, and borrowing and putting the money where it can multiply. And that begins to bring in the concept of investment, because investment is sending money to work for you, putting money into some assets so that the assets can appreciate or grow, to bring you more money periodically or at the end of some time as returns. But we have to be cautious here. There are people who will hear this and they run to borrow to start off a business. That's quite risky. Well, the entire thing of borrowing to put money in a business has its own risks, but you see, we live a risky life. It's a balance between how much risk can I take and what returns do I stand, and how do I mitigate this risk. Now, there is a danger in going to borrow to start a new venture. And if you realize, many lenders, many mainstream lenders are not keen on lending to startups, because you have no experience in that business. You do not know. The only thing you have is an idea, right? And so I see many people going to borrow to start a business they have never done before, they know nothing about. And before long, then they burn their fingers. They remain with a bad debt that needs to be paid off, and there's nothing that is coming from what they thought was an investment. So we have to be keen, especially if we want to start off a new venture. For those people who have an idea and they don't have money, we do not discourage them, because we have so many people, like the venture capitalists. They are looking for bankable ideas. They are looking for ideas that can sell, so that they invest in those ideas. Then they also mentor you. They grow with you in your business. When the business takes root, then the way you will have agreed, you settle them, they move out, they leave you with your business. But you see, those have the capacity to journey with you in the new business. But mainstream lenders may not have that time, may not have that capacity. So I just want to caution someone who might be thinking, let me rush to the bank, borrow some money, and begin this new venture. Because people fail to think about the basics. Like, at the end of 30 days, the lender wants their money back. This business that I'm going to pump money into, is it going to generate money in those 30 days? Or what is going to happen? Because I have actually met people who, they go to borrow money, they put into a new business. 30 days, the business has not started bringing money. They actually start using part of the money that is remaining to start servicing the debt because pressure is already coming.
Yeah.
That's how we begin to burn our fingers.
So I mean, in layman's language, an investment ni deni na kuletea pesa. Ni deni iko na returns, good returns. Oh, I understand that. You had lost me initially in the beginning of the conversation because I'm looking to start a business. So when you tell me, mainstream industries are not trying to invest, I lost hope. Then you saved me at the end. But thank you so much for that information. Let's keep going. And my question now is, for someone in debt, and there's this mentality, even with how do you call them, microfinances. I see this very commonly with microfinances. People take a debt and you have a time frame to pay, and you stay and say, itaisha. What is the risk of this? Because you're dealing with the person. This is the human element. There's a chance huyu mtu atasema nimechoka kumfuata, but there's also the risk of I'm doing this, but what are the repercussions? Because I don't think there are really that many structures, especially with the way there are many microfinances, that maybe you'll be on is it the CRB list or something like that?
Yes.
So what are the structures like for people maybe trying to get into the debt industry, loaning money?
You see, the borrowing transaction does not stop when you receive the money. As a good borrower, by the time you're going into borrowing, you have to remember that transaction will stop the day you have repaid your last cent of that amount. So when you are not able to repay and you keep quiet and you run away from them, next time you have a business, you go back to them, they will have blacklisted you. They have their own CRB where you say, I can't lend money to so and so. Even you as an individual, if you're lending money to your friends, and there is this friend who took money and now you can't reach them on phone, they're not talking, you also blacklist them in a way and say, next time they come, I will not listen to them. So that is how it begins to affect you. So it's dangerous to allow yourself to be adversely listed. When you have an obligation, try as much as possible to honor it. When you can't, speak out.
I like that. And just because of matters time, I think we've covered most things about debt. How to, get a debt for starting business. That's venture capitalist where you should go. How you should deal with debts. You should talk to your lenders, and why it's important to pay your debt. And when is it appropriate to say sign it and get deni when the debt is bringing back some value. And I like that we've touched on the major things. I hope when Studios Open, you can come in and we delve into it into detail. We have that whiteboard and we put down the numbers.
Yes.
I really love that. I'm looking for information and I love learning about finances. Roy, thank you so much for giving us your time this morning. Have a beautiful day.
Thank you so much for having me. God bless you and have a good time ahead.
That was Roy Okonji, and we were talking about debt. And now we want to talk to James Moria, who will be telling us more about debt. And James Moria is the CEO of Centum Investments. This is based in Kenya, but it is the biggest in Eastern Africa. And that is something to brag about. So having the pleasure to talk to him this morning is not something to overlook. So big thank you to him for showing up. But even before we get into anything, straight off the bat, James, what is a good debt? And when is debt good? Can debt be good? Please take it away.
You may not have sufficient capital on your own, equity capital, and you need to go out there and get some debt. You may need to get some debt to restart your business. So it's a critical component of capital, and we've used debt to grow. Even the company I manage, we've grown largely through using debt capital because we've not raised any equity capital for the last almost 20 years.
So you haven't really given us your opinion, especially like for smaller companies, the people who are asking, would it be advisable for me to take out a loan? Because you've said the amount you're getting back must exceed the capital for it to be a debt worth taking. But would you advocate for someone who is able to save up and then start a business? It might take longer, or what is it? Because you also need to check that the need for whatever service or whatever you're bringing into the market. What would you advocate for as?
Let's start from the basics. Let's assume you have a viable business offering a service or a good that customers want, and the business model works, the business is profitable, and it's generating positive cash flow. So what you now need is capital to finance the business. It may be capital to finance working capital or finance some capital goods in the project. There are typically two sources of capital. The first one is equity capital, which is your own money. The second one is debt. Typically, the two are not mutually exclusive. In fact, you need to have both of them. You need to put in, the lender wants to see that the owner of the business has put in some of their own equity capital, and then you come in and put in debt to supplement. Now that debt, there are various components. You can take working capital financing, just focus on working capital, which tends to be shorter term debt. You can look for longer term debt. If say you're buying a piece of equipment, say it has a 3, 4, 5 years lifetime, so you can take that kind of debt. It's also tax advantageous because you can deduct the interest that you pay on the debt from your profits in calculating your tax at the end of the year. For a lot of businesses, they're now working with turnover tax, so this may not necessarily be applicable to them. But the point is that debt is important and it's very relevant, and it's almost every business has some form of debt on their balance sheet, large or small. Yeah.
Okay. So now we're talking, today we wanted to really focus on people who are trying to cope. You know, you don't want to say, I cut my losses, I'm giving up on this business. What are my options as, not per se as an SME, as an entrepreneur in terms of growing my business? Maybe I've employed 2 or 3 people. Are my options to increase my cost of my product cost, or cut down the cost I'm using with manpower? What are the viable options as an SME to survive during these times?
So, you know, what will it, okay, let me take a step back. You know, every business exists to serve the customer. So my view is that the first point of call is to understand, what does my customer need? To what extent have their needs changed? To what extent is my product and pricing still relevant? And if there have been some changes, am I able to pivot or change my product or my price or my way I deliver the product? They may have been coming to my shop. I now need to reach them through a digital medium. So that's the first point. Now, once you're clear how you're going to serve the customer, then you're going to determine what is the demand, what is the sales, how much can I sell? Am I selling at the same level I was selling pre-COVID? Am I selling at a lower level? Am I selling at a higher level? Can I also get new customers? Because maybe some businesses where you're able to get new customers. The scale of the business, what will determine the capacity that you need to invest, how many workers you need to have for that business, will be determined by the scale of the business that you still have and the business model that you have. So my point of view is that you need to start from the customer first and try and fix that bit, and then work backwards to see what you need to do and whether even these are the right team that you have. Because your business model may have shifted to a digital business model, in which case you may either need to retrain or partner with different entities to be able to address and reach that market, because you may be reaching it differently from the way you're reaching it before.
Yeah, because the reason I'm asking this is I took a practical approach to the kind of situations I'm probably dealing with at the moment. And my first option is, I'm not getting any income. So let me find someone who has, I take from them so that I can, pay Peter, borrow Paul to pay Peter. That is whatever is really happening right now at the moment. But with reading up on things, I came to realize a lot of people my age, or around my age group, who are starting to now get into the workforce, don't know all of this language when it comes to business. Because the one thing that was really persistent in a lot of articles I read is a lot of businesses that are upcoming, they don't have a buffer. So what is it that you can just give as pointers to someone who, because life goes on, COVID or not, the idea you had could still work right now. So what are the ideas you should walk into? I have a business, instead of the mentality of, I'll borrow money and I know I'll get the income back. Yes, you've done your numbers, you've done the market research, but what are my options? Do I have what is needed? What can you give as advice to someone who wants to have a startup?
First, have a positive mindset. Because if you're positive, you can make something work. Number 2, just focus on your circle of influence. There's a lot of things happening out there that you can do absolutely nothing about. And sometimes in focusing on them, you forget what it is that I can do something about. So focus on what you can do something about. Number 3, whatever business idea you had, figure out, how do I still reach my customer? Is the customer still there? Do they still have a need for my product? How do I reach them? To the extent I have a real customer and they're still there and I can reach them, Then the next question is, how do I then go about the business of availing this particular good or service? Do I borrow money? Do I get equity? Then you are in a real business. If you are not serving a customer and you're sort of borrowing to survive, then you're not in business. That's not business. That is so we need to separate the two. If you have a real customer who is interested in your good or service and you're doing it at a profitable margin, then you are in business. And the thing to remember is that even though the economic growth has slowed down, the size of the economy is still relatively large, and there's still a lot of transactions taking place. So I think you should not give up and say, look, there's no business at all. Yeah. You should go out there and take whatever is there. Yes, the pie may have gotten a bit smaller, but there's still a considerable amount of volume of business, particularly for small and medium-sized enterprises, and also to be flexible. I was talking to somebody yesterday who told me that once COVID began, they began a virtual college to train people on digital marketing, and they now have 15 students between March and now, and each one is paying 135,000. So they're being creative. They're using their skills to create a different kind of business and sort of say, I will not give up. So I think it's important for us to work with what we have and to try to be as efficient as we can with capital.
Yeah, I like what you're talking about, to be efficient and also go with the time, because you say sometimes you don't know whether your business can be marketable on the digital plane, which is also very important to note. But also another point of advice, which is a lot of questions we get in terms of business, is what are the key things to take note and to improve as a business owner post-COVID? What are the things you need to keep in account?
So some of the things we do for our companies and guidelines that we ask them to follow is we require them to have a certain cash buffer. So somewhere between 6 months to 12 months. This you need to build progressively. And for some of them that have been affected, especially initially in the month of April and May, that cash buffer came very much in handy. When we came up with these guidelines about 2-3 years ago, there was a lot of push and pull, and people are saying you're being too conservative. Why are we tying up so much cash? But look, we said you want to build a resilient business because we don't know, you need to be able to withstand a shock. Number 2, put a ceiling to your recurrent cost to income. So if say you're making an income of $1 million, for a lot of our businesses, our costs cannot go above 40% of our income. So then put a ceiling and then work within that particular cost buffer, using that particular, so that you leave yourself some headroom. So that even if revenues come down, you still have a way to go before you get into a loss-making territory. So I think as the businesses come back, it's important for us to focus on building more resilient balance sheets. So there was really nothing wrong with the businesses, but maybe a lot of them, the overhead structure was a lot higher than the businesses could accommodate. Number 2, the cash buffers were probably a bit too thin. And so the businesses really they didn't have much runway in the event that there was a crisis.
People really needed to know that, especially about having the cash buffer, which is not something people will pay a lot of mind into. But again, when I was going through research, I don't know if Kenya has the same structure, but people have this belief of, if I stay longer with that debt, eventually it goes away. What is your opinion on this mentality that people have?
Debt, if it is not productive, if it is not generating for you cash flow, then it's very expensive. It eats into the owner's capital. Because the interest is compounding. So if you borrow at 13%, 100,000 shillings at 13%, and you don't pay for 5 years, it's actually doubling. That loan will double about every 4 to 5 years. And so it's money, it's expensive money, and you need to realize it's expensive money and it needs to be put to use productively. And if you don't have productive use for it and you can't, just pay it back. So one needs to be very judicious in not borrowing for expenditure, but borrowing to apply the capital to put it into a productive use, but not for sort of your recurrent lifestyle, especially when you mix up business money with personal money.
Yeah, Thank you so much, James. I feel like we're running out of time because we had only 15 minutes, but you've really like touched on the points that we really had. Like, what should I do with my debt? How, what kind of debt works for me? What should I know next time so that I'm not in such a situation? But in general, one question I would really like to ask you is, there's a reason you are where you are. What are your tips, besides the running half a marathon before your early morning? What are your tips to being at where you are at in terms of business?
I think it's a few things, and we've captured them in our Centum Golden Rules. One is just being positive, being positive, having a growth mindset, sort of working every day to try to improve yourself, having a sense of creating value in whatever it is that you do. But then I think at my level now where I'm managing other leaders, about empowering others to create a platform for them to be better than what they are, because that's how you create value now. For me, it's not what I'm doing directly, it's what I'm enabling other leaders to be able to do, so that everybody can be the best possible version of themselves. But I think, Laura, at the end of the day, that is using every small opportunity you have to the utmost, and because that's all you have. Like when I started, I always tell, everyone I think knows that I started in the filing room as an intern.
Yeah.
But even there, in that small opportunity, he's saying this for me is valuable, and I will give it 200%. And it doesn't matter that I think it is too small, but it's a step. And then taking one step at a time, and each step you take, being very much in the present, and saying, I'll really do my best at this point with this opportunity, rather than saying, okay, really, I'm not where I want to be, but when I get there, I'll really work hard. It is focusing on that small thing you have today is what will give you an opportunity tomorrow, and you carry on, and you'll also carry on growing and expanding your capacity, because if your capacity does not expand, you'll get to a level then when you'll not be able to handle the burden of responsibility at that level. So it's I think it's small things like this.
Yeah, it's the little. It's in the. They say the devil is in the details. That is exactly what you're saying. You focus on the small things that really make the bigger difference. Thank you so much, James. I understand you're very busy, so I would like to let you carry forward in making a very big difference and putting us on the map out there. And thank you so much for giving us your time this morning.
You're most welcome. All the best. Keep well. Thank you. Thank you for seeing.
Thank you. You too. Thank you.